when nothing happened, and everything changed. Historians call them many names: the Still Age, the Gentle Drift, the Quiet Centuries. None of the names fully capture what occurred. There were no cataclysms to mark these years, no apocalyptic wars, no singular historical moments burned into stone. The quiet centuries passed softly, and because of that, they reshaped EVIMORA more deeply than any battle ever did. The world felt safe. The twin moons burned steady. Ether roots matured. Tribes prospered. Children grew without knowing hunger or constant fear. Travel, trade, and diplomacy flourished. Healing arts advanced. New instruments, new poetic forms, new scholarly disciplines emerged. It was, by nearly all visible measures, a golden age. And that, scholars later argued, was the danger. Innovation without urgency. Without immediate threats, invention shifted from survival to comfort. Ether wings became more elegant, less rugged. Fora tools refined everyday labor. Songcraft expanded into art as much as discipline. Memory rituals became ceremonial rather than essential. Knowledge deepened, but vigilance faded. Scribes began writing more about festivals than history. Auriscribes saw fewer apprentices. Young Faelin preferred sky-weaving jewels over archival study. The world had room to breathe and chose to relax. No one realized what was quietly slipping away. Stories, becoming stories. During these centuries, something subtle happened to memory. Events once told as fact began to sound like legend. The guardians felt distant, almost mythic. The creation of the moons, something recited during festivals, not contemplated in study. Even the early warnings about sound, intention, and fora discipline softened into moral parables rather than practical instruction. Elders assured themselves, "We remember enough." They did not. Power quietly collects. As travel centralized around major ether points, influence followed. Cities anchored to the largest hubs became cultural centers, and then political ones. Leaders began controlling who traveled where, deciding which disputes mattered, funding certain histories while ignoring others. Nothing overtly tyrannical, just practical choices, convenient choices, the kind that slowly tilt the world without anyone noticing the shift. Auriscribes began to notice inconsistencies. Dates changed, events rearranged, uncomfortable truths shortened or left out entirely. They raised concerns. They were told, "These are small corrections. The spirit remains." Small corrections accumulate, songs losing their teeth. Memory songs still existed, but fewer could sing them. Training took decades, demanded discipline, and often frightened students. It was easier to learn festival rhythms, celebratory refrains, music that entertained instead of preserved. The luminari faced their own drift. Healing remained strong, but ancient guardian songs of deep repair were practiced less frequently, not because they were lost, because life seemed stable. The world felt healed already. Why reach into dangerous depths when the surface looked calm? Generations grew up knowing predictable moon cycles, predictable politics, predictable trade, predictable safety. They trusted institutions unquestioningly. They believed the past was secure. They assumed the world would always remain as it was, balanced, lit, navigable. Many historians later wrote that the quiet centuries were when EVIMORA forgot the cost of its own survival. Not through arrogance, through comfort, cracks appearing, too small to fear. Toward the end of this era, hints arose. rare fora storms behaving strangely, uncharted ether, currents behaving unpredictably, unsettling dreams reported during nocturna veils, isolated vanishings in regions dismissed as superstitious zones, small discrepancies appearing in archived records. Most were dismissed. Coincidence? Local anomaly? Old songs confusing modern readers? Nothing seemed urgent enough to disrupt prosperity. Silence continued, and silence, left long enough, can bury anything. The quiet centuries are remembered not for what happened, but for what didn't. No tyrants rose, no cataclysm struck, no prophecy broke. Instead, the world gently placed its trust in convenience, ritual habit, and selective memory. And while the moons continued their eternal dance, the truth beneath the surface began to loosen. Quietly, invisibly, waiting for the right moment to fracture. When history stopped agreeing with itself, scholars mark the beginning of this era, not by war, but by disagreement. Quiet at first, barely noticeable, a date that no longer matched another, a legend recorded differently in two cities, a treaty referenced in a document that no longer existed. Auriscribes, trained to argue about history, were used to contradiction. But this was different. Contradictions began appearing not between records, but inside the same ones. Stone tablets containing lines that had once been certain, now read differently. Archived copies showed revision marks no one remembered making. Songs preserved across generations gained new verses, with no known composer. History itself felt as though it was shifting underfoot. Small lies that became foundations. Most people didn't notice at first, or they did, and assumed harmless error. Leaders justified edits, to clarify meaning, to remove confusion, to align history with current values. Records were shortened. Certain figures became simpler. Heroes more heroic, villains more monstrous, events more convenient. A tired rationalization spread like moss. The details aren't important. We still honor the spirit. Except history is made of details, and details, once altered, become weapons. Powerful cities, those built around major ether hubs, began standardizing their own versions of history. What began as cultural pride turned into narrative control. School tablets emphasized their tribe's contributions, their leaders' wisdom, their spiritual authority. Stories uncomfortable to current politics quietly vanished. Entire migrations forgotten, treaties rewritten, ancient rivalries smoothed into false peace stories. Auriscribes protested, not loudly. That had never been their way, but firmly. They annotated texts, marking suspicious changes. This passage does not align with earlier records. Possible redaction. Source removed without explanation. And for the first time in centuries, Auriscribes began disappearing. Some knowledge became dangerous, not because it contained weapons, but because it contained truth. Hidden vaults appeared, maintained in secret by Auriscribes who realized history was under attack. They smuggled away original stone tablets, unaltered chronicles, copies of memory songs, guardian fragments. Their work shifted from scholarship to preservation. Some vaults remained known only by whispers. Others were lost entirely, buried, sealed, forgotten, even by those meant to protect them. Some were destroyed deliberately. Fires that started by accident, floods blamed on freak storms, documents swallowed by political mercy. When fractures grew impossible to ignore, the remaining Auriscribes turned again to the Echora hymns. reluctant, reverent, afraid. The songs confirmed their fears. Events the world now believed had never happened. Had happened. Figures erased from history had lived, led, fought, loved, died. Warnings once given by guardians had been cut from public teaching. The songs did not just show truth, they hurt. Listeners described feeling the weight of reality collapsing back into place around them, dizzy, furious, nauseated, grief-stricken. And in some cities, those who learned too much became dangerous, not because they sought power, because they threatened narrative. Truth versus stability. Governments split in philosophy. Some leaders believed truth must be restored, no matter how painful. Others insisted people need stability more than accuracy. Some genuinely feared chaos if older records returned. Others simply feared losing control. A quiet war began, not of armies, but of archivists, keepers, politicians, teachers, scribes. Libraries became battlegrounds. Songs became subversive. A rumor spread that anyone caught preserving contradictory histories risked exile. The rumor was not entirely untrue. The scholar's dilemma. For the first time, the Auriscribes disagreed among themselves. Some argued, our duty is truth at any cost. Others countered, truth without context destroys. If the world is not ready, we may do harm by forcing it open. They fractured into small circles, each guarding pieces of history, none of them holding the whole. Which meant, for the first time since the Guardians, no one alive knew the full story of EVIMORA. Not clearly, not completely, not anymore, common Faelin noticed in quieter ways. Grandparents remembering a different version of events than official records. Old songs corrected in newer editions. Festivals subtly rethemed. Heroes gaining new motivations that felt wrong. A whisper began circulating. The world is forgetting itself. Some dismissed it as superstition. Others felt the truth of it like a bruise beneath the skin. And still, life continued. Trade continued. The grand arena continued. The veil continued. Only the foundation beneath them all had begun to crack. And cracks do not stay small forever. Later, historians summarize the era of fractured truths like this. We did not lose history in flames. We lost it through editing. Truth became negotiable. Memory became political. Faith in record-keeping eroded. It did not destroy EVIMORA, but it made her vulnerable. Because when the past becomes uncertain, the future becomes easier to manipulate.